3 long years of torment had finally ended. Ryan arrived in his white car, a pristine moonlight, to take me back. He said with his usual cold tone, "I've heard you've learned your lesson. I'll give you a chance to prove yourself. Your sister, Claire, is gentle and refined, learn from her. Don't cause any more trouble." Everyone around thought I'd break down, beg for mercy, or cling to him as if my life depended on it. Instead, I bowed my head, lowered my gaze, and murmured a quiet, "Thank you." Ryan frowned. "I'm your fiancé. There's no need to act so distant." I gave him a faint, fleeting smile. Not for much longer. 3 years of grinding punishment had brought me to the brink, but also to freedom. Just 10 more days, and I'd leave this world forever. From that moment on, Lila and Ryan would part ways for good. After returning from the mountains, I was still wearing tattered clothes when a village boy came running to tell me, "There's a crowd at the village entrance. They're looking for you." When I arrived, the sight of more than 10 gleaming luxury cars parked near the field greeted me. At the forefront was Ryan's sleek, black SUV. I hesitated, stopping behind a tree to listen to the laughter and chatter drifting toward me. "It's been 3 years. I wonder how our once pampered lady is doing now," one voice quipped. "Pampered," another sneered. "If Ryan's family hadn't taken her in, she'd be sleeping under a bridge by now." Lila was spoiled and reckless. This time in the mountains might have knocked some sense into her. A soft, familiar voice joined the conversation, one I recognized instantly. It was Claire, Ryan's childhood crush. She had returned to his family's estate after her divorce, filling the void I had once occupied. 3 years ago, during a heated argument, I had accidentally injured Claire. Without hesitation, Ryan had sent me to the mountains as punishment. His parting words echoed in my mind, "If 3 years don't straighten you out, I'll make it 6 or even 10. This is for your own good. Only then can you be worthy of becoming a member of the Harris family." For my own good? Was that why he left me penniless, isolated, and at the mercy of the cruel locals? Was that why he cut me off from the world and forced me to fend for myself? The thought made me want to laugh, but the sound wouldn't come. As I stood behind the tree, listening to Claire's voice, her words were laced with a false sweetness that stung more than venom. "I just didn't want to make things difficult for Ryan," she said, her voice soft and selfless. "After all, Lila is his fiancée." Her gaze lingered on Ryan, her eyes shimmering with unspoken feelings. "How do you think she'll react when she sees Ryan?" someone teased. "She'll cry and beg, clinging to him like before," another added. "Did you see how poor this village is? Dirt roads everywhere. She must have had a rough time, given how spoiled she used to be." Ryan's voice cut through the conversation, cold and detached. "I came personally to see if she's truly changed. If she hasn't." Someone pressed, "If she hasn't, then what?" Ryan's tone darkened. "Then she'll stay for another 3 years." The words settled heavily in the air, making Claire's expression falter briefly before she recovered, her eyes betraying her nervous anticipation. Suddenly, someone noticed me. "Is that Lila?" a voice exclaimed. "No way, that can't be her. But look at her necklace." Ryan's sharp gaze finally landed on me, stopping at the small silver necklace I wore, a keepsake from my late mother. For reasons I couldn't understand, Ryan hadn't taken it from me when I left. "Layla," he said coldly, his tone devoid of warmth. In the past, his indifference would have cut me deeply, sparking anger or tears. But now, it left me numb. My heart felt brittle, like an autumn leaf about to crumble. "Mr. Harris," I replied quietly, tucking my hair behind my ear. Ryan frowned. "I heard you've learned to behave. Claire is kind and graceful, learn from her. Don't cause trouble." I nodded slightly, staying silent. My quiet demeanor seemed to irritate him even more than my fiery outbursts once had. One of the women in the crowd suddenly gasped. "What happened to your foot?" I glanced down at the damaged limb, hidden poorly by my broken sandals. "During my first winter here," I said flatly, "I was chopping wood to stay warm. A log fell on my toe. The nail never grew back." Ryan's expression darkened. "Why didn't you tell me? What happened to the money I sent? Why didn't you buy medicine?" I only lowered my head further, unwilling to engage. His sudden concern meant nothing to me now. "It's getting late," Ryan said abruptly, turning to the crowd. "Let's head back." His commanding tone silenced everyone as I bowed deeply. "Thank you, Mr. Harris," I said, each word slow and deliberate. The crowd fell into an uneasy hush, expecting me to grovel or beg. Claire's usually composed expression faltered, her eyes wide with surprise. Ryan stiffened, his face stormy. "Layla," he said sharply, "I'm your fiancé. You don't need to act so distant or put on this humble charade." He stepped closer, grabbing my wrist roughly. "If you ever harm Claire or her child again," he warned, his voice icy, "there will be no mercy. I'll make your life even harder than it's been." I met his gaze calmly, my heart cold and unflinching. "Mr. Harris," I said softly, "you have nothing to worry about. I've changed." For reasons I couldn't fathom, my demeanor seemed to unnerve him. He hesitated briefly, then released my wrist, motioning for me to get into his car. The ride back to the Harris estate was a silent one. Ryan drove with a clenched jaw, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. I sat in the back seat, my gaze fixed on the passing scenery. The once familiar sights of the city felt like a different world now, a world I no longer belonged to. The estate loomed ahead, grand and imposing. It hadn't changed in 3 years, but for me, it felt entirely different. My heart ached faintly as I recalled the countless moments I had spent there, cherishing it as my home. Those memories were a distant echo now. As we arrived, Ryan stepped out first, his commanding presence enough to send the waiting staff scurrying to line up in perfect order. When I exited the car, their faces betrayed a mix of shock and pity. "Lila," Ryan said, his voice curt, "clean yourself up before you see my mother. She doesn't need to see you like this." I nodded silently, clutching my bag as I entered the estate. The grandeur of the interior was overwhelming, yet it felt suffocating. When I reached the staircase, Claire was already waiting for me. Her smile was warm, her eyes full of faux concern. "Lila, welcome back," she said, tugging gently on my sleeve. "I've already asked the staff to clear out your room. Tommy can move his things to the guest room." Her words sent a sharp pang through my chest. My room, the space I had once cherished, was no longer mine. Before I could respond, a sharp, childish voice rang out from the top of the stairs. "Why should I move out?" Claire's son, Tommy, stomped down the stairs, his small face scrunched in defiance. "Uncle Ryan said this is my house," he declared. "I can live wherever I want." "Tommy, sweetheart, don't say that, Claire chided gently, though her smile betrayed amusement. The boy ignored her and grabbed a teacup from a nearby table. With a swift motion, he hurled it toward me. The cup missed my face but struck my knee, sending a jolt of pain up my leg. "Oh, Tommy!" Claire exclaimed, rushing to him with exaggerated concern. "What have you done?" "Layla, I'm so sorry." "He's just a child, he didn't mean it." I bit my lip, forcing myself to remain calm. "It's fine," I murmured, brushing past her. I climbed the stairs, dragging my bag behind me. The whispers of the staff and Claire's feigned apologies followed me like a shadow. When I reached the guest room, I paused to catch my breath. The space was bare, unfamiliar. It wasn't home. After cleaning myself up, I made my way downstairs to visit Mrs. Harris at the hospital. As I passed through the garden, the sight before me made me freeze. Ryan was with Claire and Tommy, teaching them how to play badminton. His hands guided Claire's as he adjusted her grip on the racket, his voice soft and patient. "Your grip is all wrong," he said. "Let me show you." From where I stood, it looked as though he was embracing her. Claire's cheeks flushed, and she glanced in my direction with a faintly provocative smile. "Am I too clumsy, Ryan?" she asked softly. "It's fine," he replied. "I'll teach you." The scene was too much to bear. I turned and walked away, heading for the car. But as I passed the flower bed near the garden, a thought struck me. Mrs. Harris loved hibiscus flowers. They were still in bloom. I knelt by the flower bed, carefully selecting 2 vibrant blooms. As I stood, Claire suddenly grabbed Tommy and stepped behind Ryan, her expression one of exaggerated alarm. "Ryan, look out," she cried. "Layla's." Ryan immediately stepped in front of them, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing now?" he demanded. Ignoring his outburst, I held up the flowers. "These are for Mrs. Harris," I said quietly. For a moment, Ryan seemed taken aback. Then his expression softened, but only slightly. I didn't linger to see his reaction. At the hospital, Mrs. Harris looked frail, her breathing shallow. The sight of her made my chest tighten with guilt and sorrow. "Layla," she whispered when she saw me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I knelt by her bedside. "Mom, I'm sorry it took me so long to see you," I said. She reached out a trembling hand, brushing my cheek. "You've gotten so thin," she murmured. "But at least you don't have to diet anymore. Still, you should eat more." Her weak chuckle broke my heart. "Mom," I said softly, leaning closer. "When you get better, leave the Harris family. Divorce Ryan's father. You deserve a better life, one free of them." Her gaze softened, tears pooling in her eyes. She reached up and kissed my forehead like she used to when I was a child. "Layla," she whispered, her voice trembling, "promise me you'll take care of yourself." I nodded, unable to speak. The days passed slowly. I spent most of my time at the hospital, avoiding the Harris estate as much as possible. When I did return, I made it a point to stay out of Ryan's way. He, however, seemed determined to confront me. One evening, he intercepted me in the hallway. "I need to talk to you," he said. I stopped, looking at him expectantly. "Go ahead." He hesitated, his gaze lingering on my face. "Mom says you've been taking good care of her," he began. "She's proud of you. She thinks you've grown up, become more mature and understanding." I didn't respond, waiting for him to continue. The wedding, he said finally, will need to be postponed. His words hung in the air, but I didn't react. All right, I said calmly. Do what you think is best. Ryan seemed surprised by my indifference. You're upset, he said, stepping closer. I'm not, I replied evenly. You can handle things however you like. Before he could say more, Claire's voice floated down from the second floor. Ryan, I've twisted my ankle. Can you come and look at it? Ryan turned instinctively toward her call. Seizing the opportunity, I slipped away without another word. Back at the hospital, Mrs. Harris grew stronger each day. Her moments of wakefulness stretched longer, and her voice gained a bit more strength. She encouraged me to rest when Ryan visited, making it clear she no longer wanted us spending time alone. The evening before my departure, I sat by her side, watching her sleep. My heart felt heavy with the knowledge that I would soon leave her behind. Layla, she whispered, stirring from her slumber. I leaned closer. Take care of yourself, she said, tears glistening in her eyes. Promise me you'll find happiness. Tears blurred my vision as I kissed her hand. I promise, Mom. The morning of my departure loomed closer, just a few days away. Each day felt like a final chapter in a book I desperately wanted to close. At the hospital, I focused on Mrs. Harris, ensuring she had everything she needed. Her health continued to improve, and I clung to the thought that my leaving wouldn't hurt her too deeply. Back at the Harris estate, however, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Ryan began showing up at the hospital more often, his presence a silent intrusion into the calm I had managed to build. Mrs. Harris wasn't pleased with his visits either. Each time he appeared, she encouraged me to take a break or run errands, a clear sign she didn't want us alone together. On the rare occasions I returned to the estate, the familiar scenes of Ryan laughing with Claire and Tommy painted a picture of the perfect little family. 3 years ago, such moments would have devastated me. Jealousy, pain, and helplessness would have consumed me. Now, I felt nothing at all. One evening, as I prepared to leave for the hospital, Ryan intercepted me again. He blocked the doorway, his expression unreadable. Lila, he began, his tone softer than usual. I glanced at him briefly, waiting for him to speak. Mom says you've been doing well. She thinks you've matured and changed for the better. I nodded slightly, not wanting to prolong the conversation. The wedding will be postponed, he said, watching my reaction closely. Do what you think is best, I replied calmly. Ryan frowned, clearly unsettled by my indifference. Are you upset? He pressed. No, I said simply. You can handle things however you like. Something in my tone seemed to unnerve him. He reached out as if to touch my arm but stopped himself. Lila, he began again, but Claire's voice interrupted from upstairs. Ryan, I need your help. My ankle's swollen, and it hurts so much. Ryan hesitated for a moment, torn between staying and going to her. I took the opportunity to step past him and leave without looking back. The next day brought chaos. Claire burst into the living room, tears streaming down her face as she clutched Tommy tightly. Ryan, please save my son, she cried, collapsing into his arms. Ryan's expression hardened as he gently pulled her upright. What happened? He asked sharply. This morning, I gave Tommy some clothes to wear. As soon as he put them on, he broke out in hives. His whole body is covered, she sobbed. The servants said the clothes had been smeared with seafood juice. Lila was the only one who went into the laundry room last night. She knows Tommy is severely allergic to seafood. She did this on purpose. The accusation hung in the air like a bomb, and all eyes turned to me. I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at the scene below with a calm detachment. Ryan's gaze locked onto mine, fury blazing in his eyes. "Lila," he said coldly, "do you have anything to say for yourself?" I shook my head. "No, I don't." Ryan took a step closer, his voice rising. "Is this because of the postponed wedding? Are you taking it out on Claire and her son?" "No," I said, my tone steady. "Then it's just your nature," he spat. "You've always been reckless and selfish." I met his gaze with a faint smile, my voice laced with resignation. "Think whatever you want, Ryan. It doesn't matter anymore." His fury boiled over. "If something happens to Tommy, what will you do?" I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "What do you want me to say? Should I beg for forgiveness? Promise to change? None of it would matter, would it? You've already made up your mind about me." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Without warning, I picked up the fruit knife resting on the coffee table. Gasps echoed around the room as I held the blade to my chest. "Lila!" Ryan shouted, his voice filled with alarm. I gave him one last look, a sorrowful smile curling my lips. "It doesn't matter anymore," I whispered. "You've never trusted me. You never will." Before anyone could stop me, I plunged the knife into my chest. Pain blossomed like fire, but I didn't cry out. I felt the warmth of blood soaking my dress as my knees buckled, and I collapsed to the floor. The room erupted into chaos. "Lila!" Ryan's voice was frantic as he rushed to my side. He pressed his hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. Claire stood frozen, her face pale with shock. Tommy cried loudly, but his wails were drowned out by the frantic activity around me. As my vision blurred, a faint voice reached my ears, a servant's trembling confession. "It was her," the woman sobbed, pointing at Claire. "She paid me to smear the clothes with seafood juice. She's the one who did it 3 years ago too. Miss Lila was innocent all along." Ryan froze, his hands still pressed to my chest. Slowly, he turned to Claire, his expression darkening with fury. "Ryan," Claire stammered, backing away. I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted." Her words faltered as Ryan stood, his face a mask of rage. "You've been lying to me this entire time," he said coldly. "I didn't," Claire began, but Ryan's anger erupted. "Get out," he growled. "You and your son, leave my house." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she tried to plead her case, but Ryan's attention had already shifted back to me. As the life drained from my body, I heard a calm, soothing voice in my mind. "Lila," it said, "are you ready to leave this world?" I smiled faintly. "Yes. Take me home." My vision darkened, and the pain faded. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the soft hum of machines around me. Beeping monitors and the faint scent of antiseptic grounded me in reality. My body felt heavy, but a wave of relief washed over me. I was home. A familiar figure stood by the window, his back to me. His broad shoulders trembled slightly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The sunlight streaming in illuminated him like a beacon, and I recognized him instantly. "Noah," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He turned sharply at the sound of my voice, his eyes wide with disbelief. His lips parted, but no words came out as he took hesitant steps toward me. "Noah," I said again, tears streaming down my cheeks. He dropped to his knees beside my bed, his trembling hand brushing against my face. "Lila," he breathed, his voice cracking. "You're awake." Tears fell freely from his eyes as he cupped my face with both hands, his thumb tracing my cheek as if to confirm I was real. "I'm sorry," I whispered, guilt and love intertwining in my chest. Noah shook his head fiercely. "No, don't apologize. You're here. That's all that matters." For the next few days, Noah rarely left my side. He was attentive to every detail of my recovery, ensuring I was comfortable and cared for. His unwavering devotion overwhelmed me, filling the void that had lingered in my heart for so long. But as I grew stronger, Noah seemed more distant. One afternoon, as I sat in the hospital garden enjoying the crisp autumn air, he approached me with a box in his hand. "Layla," he began softly, sitting beside me. I looked at him, sensing the tension in his posture. "I've been thinking a lot since you woke up," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "About us." He opened the box, revealing our engagement rings. My heart clenched as I realized what he was about to say. "You don't have to stay with me out of gratitude," Noah continued, his eyes avoiding mine. "You deserve to be happy. If you want to move on, I'll understand." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached for his hand. "Noah," I said firmly, "put the ring back on." He hesitated, his gaze finally meeting mine. "I don't want to move on," I whispered. "I want to stay with you. If you'll have me." Relief flooded his face, and he slipped the ring onto my finger with trembling hands. "I love you, Noah," I said, my voice steady despite the tears. "I always have. I just didn't realize it until it was almost too late." Noah pulled me into his arms, holding me as if he never wanted to let go. Our wedding was a simple yet beautiful ceremony. Surrounded by close friends and family, we exchanged vows under a canopy of twinkling lights. The love in Noah's eyes as he slipped the wedding band onto my finger was overwhelming. In the crowd, I noticed Ryan standing at the back, his face pale and drawn. He hadn't been invited, but I wasn't surprised to see him there. After the ceremony, as Noah and I prepared to leave, Ryan approached us. His once confident demeanor was replaced by a shadow of regret. "Layla," he said quietly, his voice tinged with sorrow. I'm sorry." I looked at him, my heart devoid of the anger and pain I once felt. "I forgive you," I said simply. Ryan nodded, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his guilt. As Noah and I drove away, I glanced back one last time. Ryan stood alone, his figure fading into the distance. The life Noah and I built together was one of love, trust, and unyielding support. Each day felt like a gift, and I vowed never to take him for granted. The past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I was free to love, to live, and to embrace the happiness I had long denied myself. And in Noah's arms, I finally found the peace I had been searching for all along.